Welcome to episode 11 of the Liberty Mastermind podcast. I'm Ox, along with Pat and Jack. And tonight, our special guest is retired U.S. Navy SEAL Chris Sajnog. Tonight, we'll be following up on deconstructing an online news article, discussing shooting, and picking the brain of a highly skilled professional. Although he's done taking out terrorists, he's still on a mission to help others learn to live their lives as true warriors. He spent most of his life training the world's most elite warriors, the U.S. Navy SEALs. One day, he came home from a long deployment and realized his two young boys needed him more than the SEAL teams. After 20 years of serving his country, it was time to grow up and become a father. Chris, a master training specialist in the Navy, was hand-selected to write the U.S. Navy SEAL Sniper Manual. He used his experience, plus 4 years of studying neuroscience and elite performance, to develop the SEAL training system, a fundamental shift to learning any skill. He's the author of 2 best-selling books, How to Shoot Like a Navy SEAL and Navy SEAL Shooting, and the owner of Center Mass Group, LLC, a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business in San Diego, California, and now offers his unique training online at chrissajnog.com and through licensing with strategic partners and joint ventures. So, Chris, one question before we really get rolling with the interview. If you had $1 for every time someone mispronounced your last name, how many millions of dollars would you have now?
Oh man, that is a tough one. I would have more millions than I have right now. That's for sure.
Oh man.
For those that want to know, it's Sajnog, Sai as in like, and then Nog as in eggnog. So Sajnog.
That's exactly what I tell people. You let out a sigh, you drink some eggnog, and you'll never forget how to say my name.
Yeah.
or if you grew up with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Sai like the weapon. So one thing I know about teams, guys, is you all have a great sense of humor. But let's go back to when you were younger. You weren't exactly overflowing with, say, patriotism or desire to be a warfighter in naval special warfare. So tell us why you went into the Navy and the teams.
Well, I ended up joining the Navy, honestly, because I had no place to live. I couldn't afford to live anywhere. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a job. So I really just needed a place to sleep. And I ended up kind of meeting a recruiter who said, hey, I can give you a place to sleep and a bed and some free food. And I said, well, that sounds pretty good. So yeah, I joined, and I didn't even know what Navy SEALs were until after dive school. In boot camp, my company commander was a diver, like a deep sea diver. Mm-hmm. And he ended up saying, hey, you're different than all these other guys. You're like a diver. You should go to dive school. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll go do that. And that's really what I needed. I wasn't very good in school, and I'm just now kind of sharing this with my kids who are 11 and 13.
Oh, wow.
But they're like brilliant and amazing. Their mom's a school teacher, so that helps. But yeah, so, I didn't do well at all in school, and I needed somebody to just yell at me and tell me what to do. And after that, I did pretty well. I graduated with the highest average out of dive school, so I got to choose to get stationed anywhere I wanted to as a diver. So I ended up choosing to get stationed with Navy SEALs. And then after a few tours with Navy SEALs, they were going to send me to a ship, and I've never been on a ship. I'd been in the Navy for 4 years. So I said, well, what else can I do? And I said, well, I like hanging out with these guys, so let me go to BUDS. So it actually took me 10 minutes once I decided that I wanted to go to BUDS to get orders to BUDS. So that was kind of a interesting story because I later became kind of a recruiter. They're called motivators. I was a SEAL motivator. So I'd go around and everybody wants to hear your story about how long it took you to become a SEAL. And my story is not like most others who it takes several years.
Ooh, geez.
Well, you mentioned buds. Let's drill into that. So I'm a mental health guy. I'm a psychiatry guy. I always love hearing strategies people use related to grit, resiliency. What did it take you to get through that SEAL training pipeline, which includes buds?
It's, our saying is the only easy day was yesterday. So it's going just day by day, and even during buds and especially during Hell Week, it's like making it to the next meal. And sometimes it's making it to the end of an evolution and just saying, you know what, I'm going to make it to the end of this evolution and then I'm going to quit. And you tell yourself that. And you just say, as long as I make it to the end of this, then it's okay to quit. But then you make it to the end of it and just keep making that deal with yourself. And there is 2 times when I was going through just Hell Week alone that I literally remember saying to myself, I'm going to die right here. Like I'm going to fall down and die.
Oh shit.
But in my mind, I was just thinking, I would rather that these people around me point down at me and go, he never quit, than to watch me walk away and call me a quitter.
Oh, that's powerful. That's cool.
Have you ever applied that in, your life outside of the military? In other words, make it to tomorrow, make it to, the next meal, make it to whatever. Has that, sort of framework come up?
Oh, it comes up every single day.
Every day, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, especially, I run an online business and I have several websites that I run, and they're always having problems. And, rather than smash the computer, I just say, you know what, if I can just make it through this, everything's going to be okay. And then I get to the evening and get to enjoy a bottle of wine.
Awesome.
Who would have thought buds would set you up for e-commerce? That's brilliant. Now, after about 2 decades in the Navy, you made a decision to retire from the Navy. And I suspect it was a very quick decision driven by strong emotion. Tell us about that decision to retire.
Yeah, so I came home from what would be my last deployment, and I was actually, the plan was to come back and re-enlist for $250,000 tax-free for another 5 years. And I got back from that deployment and was hanging out with my kids, and one of my sons, who was I think 3 years old at the time, maybe 4, he wasn't eating and nobody could get him to eat. And then finally one day he said to me, he goes, "Dad, if I eat, I'll grow up. If I grow up, I'll become a daddy. If I become a daddy, I'll have to leave my family."
Oh, man.
Yeah, so the next day I went in and submitted my retirement papers.
Jeez.
Very, very quick decision.
It was hard. It was the hardest decision and the easiest decision all combined, because people hear that we're a brotherhood and we bleed and sweat and die together. There's no stronger bond except for between me and my kids. So,
Jeez.
Right.
My old man was a 30-year cop, and I never saw him for the first 10 years of my life. It was always, either go play outside or play very quietly at home. And God, I missed a lot growing up with him with that too. And that's one of the reasons that, Ox and I and our buddy Jack, who's not here, we're doing this Liberty podcast and our own side gigs, is we would like to spend time with our family, that we love, instead of going out and working for someone else. So that's part of our liberty, is, eventually one day some economic freedom tied in.
Yeah. And, I did the same thing. Actually, when I retired, I started doing basically what I was doing in the SEAL teams when I was running the sniper course. Is I started training law enforcement and civilians and taking them to the range and having them shoot. And I quickly realized, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm still not at home with my kids. So that's what kind of led to the development of me figuring out a way to train people not just effectively, but more effectively online.
Could we go more into that? How does your SEAL training help you with the current stuff, whether it's e-commerce or webinars, whatever kind of online stuff that gives you the ability to spend more time with your family? Because I know they're important to you.
Yeah, living the life of a Navy SEAL, the thing that makes Navy SEALs unique is that we are able to just figure out how to do things. We just make things happen. We're not great at any one thing. There's no one thing that makes us great, except that we're not going to quit and we're going to figure a way to do something. So when I needed a website, I figured out how to build websites. So now I can build websites, and then I go, oh, how do I reach people? Oh, I need to get an email list and start, producing content. And then, as a Navy SEAL, I was heavily involved as being an instructor, running the sniper course and some other training like SQT, SEAL qualification training. So that really helped me be able to put information together, curriculum development, which helped in that part. Mm-hmm. And then just being able to realize that one of the biggest insights for me was coming to the realization that the way I was training SEALs, it works for SEALs because, and in general, high-end, tier 1 military units or whatever, they get paid to go to the range to shoot, and they have unlimited amounts of ammo, and nobody else has that. So I was trying to just take people to the range and go, just keep shooting. You'll get better. And it didn't work. So being a Navy SEAL, it just, that background allowed me to just go, let me figure it out. So that's when I started researching different, new scientific things with adult education and how the brain works and learning theory. And that led to me developing the new rules of marksmanship.
Chris, okay. That is one of my favorite quotes from you, man. I got to tell you that I felt that same way. My job in the military was primarily to train, and even on operations, all our downtime was training. But I left and I went to local law enforcement, and all of my time was spent doing administrative work and being out on the street doing the mission. And my training time had completely disappeared, and I built up so much rust, and I thought, I'm doing the mission every day, but I have no time to kind of sharpen that edge. Like it drove me nuts. And I love that you say that. And that's something that I've heard you say a number of times. I appreciate that, man. That's really cool.
Awesome.
And you mentioned the new rules of marksmanship. We'll loop back around to that. I wanted to shift gears for a moment and talk about the content, the high value information you put out on YouTube. And you recently shared a video, and we'll put it in the show notes, entitled "How Police Officers Are Being Trained by the NRA to Shoot at Black Shapes Without a Weapon." And you shared it directly with the top 10 anti-police violence groups in the country. So what has been the response to that you put out, the video?
Well, I knew there would be a negative response from the NRA and people who have taken the NRA to be their God with a little G, But, the NRA does great things with keeping our gun rights and our ability to, have firearms, except in California, of course. But the thing that they have never done, which is what they started off, like the NRA started off on a platform to train people. That is their main platform. It wasn't gun rights. It was to train people. And they stopped advancing any part of their training as soon as they started, whenever that was, 1879 or something like that. So the training they do is just archaic. And the main part about that article or the video is just really calling attention, because people don't understand that most military units, law enforcement units, the NRA's official qualification target is a black silhouette that does not have a firearm. So it's an unarmed silhouette of a human shape. And people are trained under stress to shoot that. So when somebody sees a silhouette at night, and by the way, we are all silhouettes at night. It's not just black people or white people or green people or yellow people. We are all silhouettes. They're going to shoot them, if so provoked. And I know there's tons of reasons for them to get provoked and to be on edge. But in the end, they should not be training to look at a human shape that they know does not have a firearm. Or even, I'm sure you guys have seen the targets, the ones that look like they could have a firearm behind their back, like they're hiding something, right? So why are they shooting those? So anyways, the reaction from that side, of course, was bad. Everybody's calling me an idiot, and this is so stupid. Oh, if I shoot at bullseye targets, does that mean I'm going to freak out and start shooting car tires? Like, oh, wow, thanks for adding your intelligent comment. But the most interesting part that you mentioned is I did try to share it with groups that I thought would want the help. Like there's these groups that are against police violence. So I reached out to them and actually sent them each personal emails with links explaining how this can help stop police violence, because there's a scientific reason behind, obviously not all of the shootings, but I gave the definite argument as to why it should not be happening. But yeah, not a single one of them replied to me. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was like really surprised at that at first. But then actually a friend of mine, my neighbor, he's like, no, obviously they didn't respond to you, because if you fix their problem, then they don't have a platform anymore. Right? So what are they going to complain about? Like, oh no, Chris solved our problems. Now, black people aren't getting shot by cops anymore. Like, oh.
Yeah, so, I don't think we're ever fixing the police shooting people issue. As long as they got guns, there's going to be people to shoot, regardless of the race issue or the having weapons or not issue. Yeah,
and I just think it's important to get the police the best training they can get.
I will 100% agree with you on that one. I can't speak much to the race one. I don't know if there's an answer for that, because what if you start shooting white targets or pink targets? I mean, is there? I'd be happy to switch it up. The only thing I noticed from your video is, unfortunately for the people that aren't informed, is that's not the only training that we get. And I'm speaking from both my Coast Guard career for 10 years and my law enforcement career on the street. That's not all that we do. And there's several stages outside of that training. So if you look at the video and you say, all police get only 50 rounds and they only shoot black unarmed targets, would be incorrect. So, but I do think that is a big part of the problem. So not speaking to the race, but I do think it's a huge problem that you go to the range and they say, okay, you have 10 seconds to shoot this silhouette, and no one says, why am I shooting him? Why am I not standing behind cover? Why am I not moving and shooting? Why am I not seeing a face? Or, I was really lucky. I know we're going to talk about this here in a minute, but at one of the Coast Guard units I was at, we did a lot of training with simunitions, which I'm so thankful for. So we shot actual people that were trying to kill us with actual modified weapons. We did shoot a lot of paper targets in the Coast Guard that had people's faces on it, both at Camp Lejeune when I trained there for close quarters combat, and then later down in Miami at my Techlit South unit. I know we shot blue targets. I know we shot the green and gray bowling pin style targets. So it's not all that we do, but I do 100% agree with you, Chris, that it is a huge problem that training is a complete joke with almost all of the government. Almost all.
Yeah. Yeah, you're 100% correct. And I said that knowing that it wasn't, everybody, but I didn't want to make this a long video explaining, well, there are some that do this and, going into the explanations.
You're correct. It's definitely a serious issue that people are dying because of.
Yep. So.
And that's a shame that none of them got back to you yet.
Yeah. It makes sense now that I understand. No, yeah, they don't want their problem fixed. They want to have a platform
of course
to be able to complain.
That's what's that called? The definition of a boondoggle. The government creates an answer, but that answer creates a new problem that they can now fix.
Yeah.
I'm happy to move into segment 2 here. There is an article that we'll put in our show notes that you were interviewed by a fellow from thegunwriter.com.
Yep.
And for everyone in the audience, I think this is a good start since you're going to hear this term a lot. The unit that we just referenced, Tactical Law Enforcement Team, or a TACLET. As far as I know, there's 2 of them in the Coast Guard right now. And Chris, hopefully you can help me because I spent 4+ years at one of those units, not the one you were teaching at, but maybe we can tell the audience, because I haven't talked about it yet, what that unit entails. You and me can maybe kind of work through that so people know what kind of a unit that was.
Yeah, so when I was fired a couple years ago, there was 2 units left. I'd actually trained both units, so I went down to Miami. But
yeah, I might have met you. I was thinking the other day, I might have met you and not even known it.
Yeah. I was known throughout the Coast Guard as the guy who failed everyone.
I still might have met you and still might not know it.
Yeah. So, but anyways, the TACLETs, what they do is they do like counter narcotics boardings. So their main mission is to take down vessels at sea, to interdict them if they're have drugs or whatnot, and try to get the drugs. So that's their mission. Is they're supposed to be trained to be able to do underway nighttime opposed boardings. So that means somebody's shooting at them at night when they're on a boat. And their certification training to get that qualification was done during the day in a building, with the simunitions, as you said, shooting at paper targets. Mm-hmm. And I tried fixing that for about 5 years, and they really didn't like me for that.
Well, I'm really glad to talk to you about that because I am on the same page. I got to that unit when I was still blindly patriotic, and I thought, if the government says it must be good. And I thought, hey guys, we're doing this during the day in a building with just paper targets. And again, I am 100% on track with you for that one. Let me bring up one next point here is that for the audience, you can help me with this too, Chris. One of my favorite things to talk about is kind of a full disclosure, as full as I can without doing anything illegal, but a full disclosure of what happens behind the scenes in the government. So a lot of people they say this phrase, oh, the police are trained to do this, or the military is trained to do that. Well, trained or certified doesn't mean proficient, and it doesn't even mean trained sometimes. So at my unit, we kind of had a selection process. It wasn't a Navy SEAL selection process, but it was a couple days. You show up, you do some physical training, you do some push-ups, you run around the sand, and then at the end, maybe they say, oh, maybe you can come to our Coast Guard TACLET unit now. Mm-hmm. Well, while that was going on, I went from boot camp to kind of a field unit, and then to some training, and then they said, oh, sure, you can go to that unit, and so I went. So I missed the selection and just went right to the unit. So while there was a pipeline selection process, not everyone used it. So later in my career, I think that I earned my position. I trained hard. I got qualified. I put a lot of my life into that. And then at one of my later deployments in my career, I had a guy that had spent 18 years being in charge of a mechanic shop in the Coast Guard. And then because of his high rank, because of how much time he spent in, he came to our unit. His literal words out of his mouth were, oh, well, the job selector said it was in Miami, so I thought, that sounds fun, Miami. And he came to our unit to be a high-ranking person in charge in the field of an international counter-narcotics operation where we are expected to jump out of helicopters and board boats while people are fighting us and all that nonsense. So we had even because of our design and our selection and the bureaucracy, there were major hurdles in that. So it's not always what you think, and because you wear a cool guy outfit doesn't mean you're good at what you do. So I'm totally tracking with you, and I'm super pumped to get into this article a little bit.
Yeah, there's everything that you just said. Unfortunately, with the Coast Guard, that is the norm. That's not an exception. Mm-hmm. And you talk about the difference between somebody being qualified and getting the proper training. but there's already legal definitions of what training has to be to be considered actual training.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that in that video, and it's also in some of the documents that I have posted online through my whistleblower investigation. But these are things that I shared with the Office of Special Counsel when I became a whistleblower against the safety violations that Pactaclet had been, major safety violations for 5 years straight, including case law that states if you do not train in the environment that you are going to operate in, you have not trained. So
sounds reasonable.
Yeah, it's saying if you don't train at night underway, you are not trained. And so this is when I started, I was failing people. And I was the first person to start failing anybody at the Tacklets. Because before I got there, I was the first Coast Guard civilian to work there. Everybody else were contractors. So what they would do is these contractors would come in, and they were all great guys. They're great trainers. They were mostly Army SF guys. And that's part of the reason, nothing against Army SF, but that's how your underway boarding training was started by people who don't do underway boardings, the Army.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
So these guys were contractors. So they'd go around to the Tacklets, and then they'd also went to the MSSTs, and they would train them. And they would go, hey, you guys suck, and you fail. And then those guys would go back to their unit and go, hey, that instructor was no good. And then the unit would have the company that hired them fire that instructor so he could no longer work. So all these instructors that were training the Tacklets and the MSSTs for 10 years before I got there knew that if they failed anybody, they would be fired. So they just passed everybody.
So a soft coercion.
Oh, yeah. I remember because when I first started, I was co-training with them. They were on their way out, I was on my way in, and we would be doing these tests, for a team. We'd be doing a team test evaluation, and they'd get done. They'd be given their brief. They were running the evolution. They'd be go, great job, guys. Yeah, huge success. A couple things to work on, but yeah, you guys are 100% mission ready. And I'm like, hey, 3 of their guys got killed. They didn't find 4 of the terrorists that were on board this supposed vessel building. How is this a success?
Well, I'm glad you said that. I stopped drinking the story tied into that. I stopped drinking the Kool-Aid very shortly after I got to that unit. Part of that was the political issues and is the government good or bad? Why are we doing this job? And all those questions that I didn't get answers to. But part of that was while many of the guys were competent and they took to their training and they did what they were supposed to and they learned how to operate their guns and move in a team stack and all that, while many of them were capable, they were also a bunch of prima donnas and they were sensitive. So I looked at it with what I think was a critical thinking point of view, and I said, a lot of them came to me and said, Instructor A said I did a good job clearing that room, and Instructor B said I did a bad job. And at my unit, we had a Navy SEAL teaching us, and we had a local SWAT officer teaching us, and they were our 2 sole contractors. And one of them...
I know who you speak of.
I'm pretty sure you do. One of them, the guys would always come to me because I actually had, for some weird chance, I had a relationship with him before he started working for the Coast Guard, and I didn't know it until the day he got hired.
The local cop?
Yeah, so I knew him.
Yep.
And he was the not favorite guy. And they would say, well, the SEAL said I did a great job, and the SWAT guy said I didn't. This is bullshit. I don't like that guy. And I heard that so frequently, and I thought, I started getting kind of my game plan together, and I started approaching my team members, and I said, that you didn't fail, but that's a fucking blessing. Trying to keep track of my language here. That's a blessing. One guy says you could have done it a little better, and one guy says he likes what you did, but you know what? Now you have 2 tools in your toolbox, so stop complaining and take it for what it is. It's information for you to use. And they even said that in their debriefs. They said, hey, I really wish you did that a different way. And then people got so upset, and they started playing favorites, and they started saying, oh, I'm going to complain to each other, and I'm going to complain to my boss, and maybe my boss will say something to someone else. And So I'm done with the soapbox for that topic, but I just wanted you to know that I thought that was a huge blessing, and then that also kind of took me down the rabbit hole of, well, maybe things aren't what they seem.
Yeah. The one of the interesting things is, like, people, the guys on the team that worked hard and knew their job was potentially dangerous, we all got along great. And the ones that actually did boardings, so they'd go on these deployments, which is one of the things is funny when they said they're going on deployment and a deployment's like 30 days. I laughed for forever when I heard that. I'm like, that's not a deployment. And by the way, if you have cell service, when you're on deployment, you're not on deployment.
Vacation.
Yeah. But anyway, but if they actually had to do a boarding where they drew their weapons during that boarding, they all came back and thanked me. They're like, oh my, like the whole thing with like clearing rooms with automatic weapons and pointing your guns at each other, even though there's a paper thin wall between you, and thinking that's safe, and I wouldn't let them do that. Like,
go figure. Boats are totally different than buildings on land.
Yeah. And the other thing about these guys is the hardest workers that wanted to stay at Tacklet, and for whatever reason, they would send them off to, do fisheries or whatever.
Yeah, we did not have a program like the Navy did to keep people in that environment, and we still don't.
Yeah, but it was always the best ones, it seemed, that were like, nope, you can't stay here. Mm-hmm. But this chief who, fired his gun sideways into the berm for some reason in the middle of an evolution, he stays.
I had 3 different commanding officers I worked under at Tacklet, and the second one that got there, his first words out of his mouth were, or maybe second or third words, but it was in the first meeting he had with the troops where he met us. He said, and by the way, if you're not fit for physical fitness standards, and if you're overweight, you have 30 days to get it fixed, and if not, you're out of here. And then a year later, I deployed with a guy that was 60 or 70 pounds, obesely overweight, but he was a high-ranking guy. He was a chief, so he was a team leader, even though he couldn't do 5 pull-ups. So
I loved it. I used to. So I don't talk about it much. I'm 100% disabled, just from parachutes not opening and some other things that happened to me as a Navy SEAL. But so I would go to these not workouts, but the PT tests. Like in the Tacklets, they used to have these harder PT tests, and they stopped doing them because too many people failed.
Oh, preaching to the choir. That is a huge bone I had to pick with the military. God, it killed me when that happened.
So I would go, not planning to do it. I would just go, oh, what are you guys doing this morning? Oh, I'll go watch. And everyone before, oh, what's the slowest time I can run this in? Mm-hmm. Oh, what's the least amount of push-ups I can do? And they're all like half my age. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to beat you right now. Like, let's go. And I would. But there was at Pack Tacklet, there's always one kid who was faster than me. But
you might like to. I don't know if you're familiar with this story, but I was getting ready to go to Africa to do the counter-piracy operations out there off the coast of Somalia. So they warned us way ahead of time. They said, everyone on this team, because you guys are going next, you need to be able to do 5 pull-ups, 5 chin-ups. We're going to send you to vertical insertion school, and then CQC school in Camp Lejeune. Then you're going to Africa. And I was like, great. So at the time, I could do about 1 pull-up and 1 chin-up. So every single day, I showed up to work early, and I stayed late, and I practiced. And by the time vertical insertion school, physical fitness test came around a couple months later, I did about 15 or 16 pull-ups, and then I took a break, and I did 15 or 16 chin-ups, hands both ways. Mm-hmm. My officer for my team went up to the pull-up bar, and for some reason our CO and our XO, the 2 highest-ranking guys at the unit, showed up to watch this to confirm that we weren't cheating or slacking on our test or lying. So I did my job. I did all the pull-ups I was asked so that they can make sure I don't fall off the freaking rope and die. And the lieutenant on my team, the highest-ranking person on my specific 8-guy unit, it was a female. She jumps up on the pull-up bar, does 3 chin-ups, can't do a 4th, so she didn't meet the minimum. Jumps up to do pull-ups for no reason, does 2, can't do it. So we all get in a little huddle outside the gym, and the CO and the XO of my unit, two highest ranking guys, they go, "We should be so proud of her. She is one of the best team leaders at this unit. Unfortunately, she's not going to, the deployment with you guys because she can't meet the standard, but she's so great. We gave her a literal round of applause for trying and failing." And I kept thinking, I always have this internal debate. Do I raise my hand or not? Do I raise my hand or not? So I thought, if I had failed and she had passed, would I be getting a round of applause right now? This is bizarre. So hopefully the audience knows that story now. So the military is not always what you think it is.
Yeah, you talk about raising the BS flag. So when I was in the Navy, before I made chief, everybody always talked about, when I make chief, I'm going to be the one raising the BS flag. I'm going to raise the BS flag. Well, I made chief, and I actually did that. So everywhere I went, I'm like, BS flag's up, here it is. And everybody's looking at me like, dude, you don't actually do that. So yeah, so I made chief after like 9 years, and then I spent 11 years as a chief, and I would never make senior chief.
Oh, you don't make friends fast when you speak the truth, I bet.
No. That's all right. I'm glad I can look my kids in the eyes and tell them I did the right thing.
Yeah, I was having a hard time being a part of that any longer. So that was one of the reasons I left. It was the bureaucracy. I just couldn't do it. You said in your article, you referenced not having EMTs. So let's do a little bit of insider information here, because I really like doing that for the audience. So you said in your article a couple times, you said that training was unsafe, and you were supposed to have a medical person at your training, and there was not, or you were told to not bring one, or something to that effect. Is that right?
Yeah, that was a single event, but we were at a range doing live fire training, and the rule for this range and that command in their manual was that if it was over a 30-minute drive to the nearest emergency room or trauma center, that you had to have an EMT there. And just classic to what they normally do, they just decided one day, without telling me, I'm the senior firearms instructor there. I show up to run training, and well, wait, where's our EMT? And then they go, oh yeah, we were told we don't need to bring one anymore. So I'm like, well, okay. I'm not running training. You're not shooting bullets. So we can sit here and dry fire all day if you want, but if you guys want to shoot, get an EMT out here. So I called back to the command, and they said, no, we're telling you don't need an EMT anymore. And I go, okay, well, your manual says you do, so I'm not running training. So then I called their boss, as you're familiar with the dog.
Mm-hmm. And thanks, great. I thought I forgot about them.
Yeah. So I called the dog and said, hey, they don't have an EMT for me here. They said it's okay. Is it okay for me to train? And they're like, no, it's not okay for you to train.
Great.
So then there was this big stink about, oh, you went over our heads. You went outside the command. You messed up. Like, okay, I'm trying to keep you safe, but
sorry.
Anyway, trying to follow your rules.
Here, I've experienced that firsthand with my own eyeballs. I had two, and like you said earlier, the people that were in charge of training the operators may never have gone on a deployment, which was interesting. That happened at my unit. So with two guys that weren't qualified and had not gone on all the drug deployments or piracy deployments that I went on, they said, we're going to the fire tower and we're going to do some rappelling with the new guys. And I said, great, you guys have an EMT? They went, we don't need one. So, okay, let me go grab my bag and I'll go with you. And I was not what the civilians would call an emergency medical technician, but I was what the Coast Guard allowed, as we had some tactical medical training, so we could do some tourniquets and some IVs and some basic stuff.
Yep.
So I go, at a minimum, let me grab my bag, I'll go with you. And they go, geez, whatever. So they throw the ropes in the bed of the truck, and they grab the harnesses, put them in the truck, and they grab the two new guys, and they put them, in the government vehicle behind them. So I'm in a pickup truck with two guys on my training staff, the ones that are the best and brightest, that train all the people to make sure they're squared away. And I'm in the back seat. And I have my little emergency medicine bag. And they look back at me when they're driving and they go, Pat, what are you here for? You're going to do your tactical medicine? What are you going to prevent a gunshot wound? Well, all we're doing is driving to the firehouse to do some rappelling. And I said, I'm a certified rappel master, first of all. Second of all, I'm not really here to fix gunshots, but have you ever heard of, I don't know, falling off a freaking tower and getting a compound fracture in your leg? Like, at least I can put a tourniquet on you. Did you bring tourniquets? And I'm like, well, no, but you're stupid. I'm like, oh, great. This is a great environment. Really great, guys. So we drive to the training, and we undo the rope, and I start walking inch by inch, and I put my little fingers at the beginning of the rope, and I squeeze the rope as I go, inch by inch, and I find a soft spot about 3/4 of the way through. And I go, and they look at me, and they go, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time? I said, I'm checking the rope so that it doesn't fray and cut in half and our guys die. And they said, it's fine. I checked it last week. I said, great. The policy says you check it every time. And I said, by the way, I found this soft spot, which means the rope in the middle is parted. You can't use this. And they said, how many feet are left? Like 20, 30 feet? I said, well, yeah, why? They said, well, we'll just use the other end. I said, what about the next time when someone forgets to check it and you have someone hanging off a building and they decide, oh, let me bounce up and down, and it parts and they die. And they're like, it's fine, you're such a baby. And I'm like, I'm not being a... My policy says I'm supposed to cut this rope in half right now so that nobody can use it ever. And they said, well, you're not in charge here. I said, you know what? That's right. I'm not in charge. So you know what? Let me make it very clear. I'm not taking part in today's training. I'm completely done. I'm going to be in the truck. Bye. So that's the environment that we're put in. And it is not conducive to critical thinking. It's not conducive to safety. And it's very coercive. I mean, it's really bad.
So I've got a funny, one of the funniest stories about the clown show that I worked with for 6 years. And it was the very first time we went to the range, and they were loading up the trucks, and they had an open bed truck with just the gates on the side of the truck. And they were taking cases of weapons, big weapons cases, and literally just throwing them in the back of this open bed truck. Now, I have done my share of transporting weapons as a Navy SEAL around the country, around the globe, and I've never transported weapons in an open truck, like never. So I said, I'm like, hey, I don't know what your guys' rules are in the Coast Guard, but I've never transported weapons in an open truck like this. Like, they could fall out, anything could happen. Can we get a different truck? Can we use that pickup truck with at least the shell on it? And they're, no, this is what we've been using for years. It's fine. This is what you're talking about. I'm like, okay, just that's really weird. So we go to the range, and everything goes fine. Nobody gets shot, and we're driving back, and I'm in this truck, and I turn around, and I look, and I go, hey guys, the back gate's missing. They're like, huh? And I'm like, yeah, it looks like about half your boxes are missing too.
Oh, geez, I heard about that.
Yeah. So we pull off to the side of the freeway, and they're counting, and they lost 5 weapons boxes with automatic weapons
fully
on the
automatic
side of a road. So the lieutenant is in there with me, and he's like, what do I do? What do I do? Turn around and go back. And I'm like, I tell you what you're going to do right now is you're going to call the CO and tell him what happened. No, I can't call him. I can't call him. I go, either he hears it from you and you have a chance of keeping your job, or he hears it from somebody else and you will never work in this community again.
Oh, jeez.
So anyways, he calls him. Lucky enough, some good Samaritan who wanted to be like a border guard, like he was a recruit for a border guard or something, grabbed all the boxes, put them in his truck, and took him to the border crossing, because that's where we trained was right by the border. So yeah, and that's just normal to them. It was the same thing with when I got there, and I'm like, hey, how come you guys don't have lanyards on your pistols? Oh, you can't have lanyards on our pistols. They get caught on everything when we're doing our high speed boardings.
They also fall into the ocean.
Yeah, like, first off, you've never done a high speed boarding. I have. I've never got my lanyard caught on anything, but I have seen probably about 10, 15 people hanging upside down on a caving ladder with their pistol dangling by their lanyard. And they're like, no, you're trying to make us into Navy SEALs. Oh, okay. Well, after 2 weapons were lost, from boat crashes or people, climbing onto a vessel and their gun falls in the water. Oh, I guess we got to wear stupid lanyards.
Jeez. So for the audience, since we're going kind of deep here and behind the scenes, I think it's important that we tell people some of the things that are shocking that happen behind the scenes. But I do think that whether you agree with our mission or not, I started to disagreeing with that. At least the drug mission, the piracy thing I get. But I started disagreeing with it morally towards the end. But whether I do or not, I still think that some of us that worked very hard were very good at getting our mission done in spite of our command and the policies that surrounded us. I mean, we like it or hate it, we did stop a lot of drugs from getting here. But if you think that there's such a thing as a whistleblower protection act or law or code, then you are either misinformed or you're uninformed. There is no other option. And I also, Chris, I believe in my heart and soul that you are either explicitly or either indirectly and coercively told to not report safety concerns and to not provide us better training. I'm certain that that's got to be correct.
Oh no, they did everything they could do to stop everything I did. And then when I became a whistleblower by reporting them to the Office of Special Counsel, you're 100% correct. The Office of Special Counsel is a government organization that reports only to the President and Congress. And I reported Pack-Tacklet to them, and I gave them 500 pieces of evidence. And I'll just focus on one piece of evidence, just to make it clear. So the range we trained at is called the South Bay Rod and Gun Club. It's a civilian, gun range. And the Coast Guard's safety manual says that every day you have to inspect that range, just like, you have to inspect the ropes every time you use them. And once a month, the range has to have additional inspections to make sure everything's going well. And once a year, someone from a larger Coast Guard organization has to come in, one of the head armorers, to inspect the range to make sure it's safe. And they have to have a sheet that's filled out that says this range has passed its annual safety inspection. And you have to look at that sheet every time before you train. So one of the things I said is this range has never had a safety inspection, like not once. And I provided that evidence to the investigators, which, by the way the investigations work with the Office of Special Counsel is they have the unit that investigate themselves. So CGIS, the Coast Guard Investigative Service, investigated the Coast Guard. So the Coast Guard came to my Coast Guard unit, and the head investigator was a guy who used to be on Tacklet and whose best friend was the XO. I
love that. I'm best friends with your high-ranking guy. That's my favorite.
It's literally our first meeting. Is he said, I'm good friends with Commander Errett, and he said everything you say is a lie, and I believe him. And this investigation's over. That was our conversation.
I'm surprised.
Like, okay, well, here, let me give you all this evidence. And he left. He went back to Washington. Before he even let me give him evidence, I had to mail it to him. So one of those pieces of evidence was the range has never been inspected. So they finished their investigation, and this is up. I have it posted now publicly online, but their investigation report is about 80% redacted because they didn't investigate any of the safety allegations. They investigated me as being a bad instructor. So they had to redact all that information out of there. So it's a bunch of black pages, something to shoot at, apparently. So they took that information. The Office of Special Counsel looks at this investigation, then reports to the president. Despite most of the investigation focusing on things they weren't supposed to investigate, we find that there was nothing wrong in the investigation. So fast forward to a little bit. I was told that they did a safety inspection of the range, and so was everybody else in the Coast Guard, or at least Pack-Tacklet, because we went back to training at the range. So we're at a meeting about a year later. It was coming up on a year, so I asked the armory chief, who's supposed to be in charge of this stuff, I said, hey, we're almost at about a year from our last safety inspection. Do you know when I think it was ForceCom, is coming out to do the annual inspection? And he goes, oh, they never came out to do an inspection. We've never had an inspection. They know it won't pass. And I look over at the XO, Commander Craig, and I'm like, huh. And his face turns like beet red. He's like, he starts sweating, So I got up and walked out. So he smartly calls me and doesn't send me an email, because by this time I'm, keeping track of all communications.
Oh, that's such a great tool. I use that every day.
Yeah. So he calls, so I have no record of it. And he says, Chris, the CO asked, that's Commander Gomez, by the way, asked me to call you and ask you to please not report this until we have time to figure it out and get it fixed. Well, I had thought at that time the investigation was still going on. Like I didn't know. I thought there was still a retaliation investigation going on, but they were working behind the scenes to close it. It's kind of another long story. But so anyway, so I found out that they lied to investigators and that the Office of Special Counsel lied to the president. And I told the Office of Special Counsel that. I'm like, hey, they haven't done a safety inspection ever on the range. Here it is in my initial claim as a whistleblower. Here's their report saying that it was done. And now here's evidence showing that they had lied and you've lied to the president. What are you going to do about it? And the Office of Special Counsel decided to wait for it, close my case. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that is really common in the military.
Yeah.
And let me give
and just so you know, you are, I think, the fourth or fifth, not just Coastie, but TACLET member who has contacted me since then. And, doesn't want to say their name or, anything like, oh, I'm so sorry. You're 100% right. It's like, no one wants to do anything about anything. And they're all afraid to get fired.
Well, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm a super low ranking dude. I'm happy to have your words out there. And let me give the audience since we talked about emails not being tracked, a quick piece of some real serious value here. So if you work anywhere in the government, and even big businesses do it too, just like you said, Chris, when they call you, or even if they text message you, or if they just have a conversation with you, they might say, oh, let me do a little coercion and get you to not do something you should really be kind of doing. The first thing I do, since I learned my lesson, is I go, great, so you want me to do this thing outside of policy. You got it. And then I walk away. And before I do that thing, I go to my computer, my government computer, and I open my government email, and I go, sir, just to be clear about what we just talked about, you ordered me to do this thing outside of policy. I told you I really didn't want to do it. You told me I better do it. Just so we're on the same page. Have a great day. Yep. I'm going to go do that thing now. Send. And then that never disappears.
Yeah.
So I actually literally just did that today with the government.
Yeah.
Great tool.
No, I did that all the time, and that is great advice. And one last part about that, and having that information out there, I filed 10 or 12 Freedom of Information Act requests to the U.S. Coast Guard to get those emails that I have. So I requested my emails. I requested Lieutenant Commander Errett's, Lieutenant Commander Craig's, Commander Gomez, all these guys who lied to investigators. I asked, hey, send me all their emails. And they haven't even responded to that. So there is a cover up going on. I never would have believed it before I had been involved in it. But anyway, I'm not one to cry over, my losses.
All right. Perfect. Well, either way, Chris, I love the way you attack training. So I think Ox has some questions for you about some shooting and some training. And Ox, take it away.
Right on. One thing that stands out from your approach to teaching shooting, whether it's online videos or books, is when you have a new person to shooting, you don't just hand them an AK or a 1911 and say, all right, let's go smoke some targets at the range. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I actually think, I believe, and it's scientifically backed up, that going and shooting a gun and trying to learn like that is the worst possible thing you can do. because you're going to cause an explosion in your hand, which is going to reinforce that neural pathway that you're trying to create. And you're not going to do it right because you don't yet know how to stand. You don't know how to hold the gun. You don't know how to focus. You don't know anything about shooting. So why in the world would you put it in your hand and start making it have little explosions? And the thing that happens is people will like flinch or anticipate, right? Because, oh, there's a big explosion. And then they spend the rest of their shooting lives trying to control the recoil. And I always compare that to if you rode your bike for the first time and you got on your bike, no training wheels, and you went and you fell and crashed and you got hurt really bad. Now you spend the rest of your life riding your bike thinking that the purpose of riding a bike is controlling the fall.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So like if you know how to hold a gun properly and you know how to stand and you know the mechanics and you know the physics of how everything works, you can shoot a gun and there's going to be, like no recoil. And you can watch great shooters like Jerry Mikulek, who's, however old that dude is, like 137 years old, but he can shoot like a little snub-nosed pistol upside down with his pinky finger and hit targets at 200 yards because he understands the mechanics of it. The gun doesn't just jump out of your hand if you know how to support it. So that's how I teach shooting. I teach people learn how to shoot before you go shooting.
Awesome. And maybe to finish us off here, if we've got another maybe 5 minutes or so, I know you like talking about the mind, and so do I, being a mental health guy. I wanted to ask you about visualization, mental rehearsal, also kind of get your take on purpose or having a strong purpose for everything we do. And both of those topics tie into your new rules of marksmanship. Could you tell us about those and maybe a little bit about each?
Yeah, I could talk for hours about that. Unfortunately, I don't have hours, but
right.
So I teach people, I say you want to become an MVP shooter, which stands for meditation, visualization, and positive thinking. So what meditation is, it's simply learning to focus your mind. It's not about clearing your mind. It's definitely not about any type of Eastern religion or anything like that. It's just brain performance training. And what that does, it allows you to access parts of your brain that normally people don't use. Normally people are only using the information that they are getting through their eyeballs. So your eyeballs and your conscious thought, you're able to process about 120 bits of information per second. So we're having a conversation right now with three people. So I'm having a conversation with two people. Each of you, if we're talking together, you're each giving me about 20 or 60 bits of information per second that I'm trying to process. So that takes up all my capacity to process information consciously. So if I can tap into my subconscious mind and learning to do that through meditation, I have millions of bits of information that I can perceive at any 1 second. And this is what, say, allows me or a good shooter at a TAC, let's say, to be able to go into a room where people are going to be shooting at him and not rely solely on their eyeballs to detect what's happening in the room, but to use their subconscious awareness and be aware of everything that's in the room. So just I know by using that say there's at 90 degrees off to my right, there's a guy with a gun. It's not pointed at me, but I know at 45 degrees to my left, there is a guy with a gun and he's bringing his gun up on me right now. And I'm not looking at either of those. So what I'm going to do, and this is how I teach people to shoot and to be able to do it fast and accurately, is to be aware of a target, bring my eyes to my awareness, and then I bring my muzzle or my sights to where my eyes are. And it always has to happen in that sequence. If it goes out of that sequence, you either get shot or you miss what you're shooting at. So that's the first thing with meditation and training the mind. And I'm actually just started working with Deepak Chopra on doing some corporate training using these same techniques. And then comes visualization. And everybody uses visualization, whether people think they do or they don't. So an example would be if I say, hey, let's go hit a baseball. Here's a bat, go hit a baseball. The first thing that you have to do is picture yourself swinging a baseball in your mind, one way or another. You have to do that. If you don't picture it, you won't be able to do it, right? So everybody does visualization, and people do it different ways, whether you're looking at it like you're looking at a TV or whether you're looking at it first person. That really doesn't matter, and different people respond better to different ways. But one thing with visualization is your neurons in your brain cannot tell the difference between whether you're visualized doing something or whether you're actually doing it. And the kind of little piece of proof that I like to give to people with this one is, have you ever woken up from a dream in a sweat or scared because it was so real, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's what visualization is. So being able to do that, and when you visualize things, you can always visualize doing things perfectly, which when you're practicing physically, you're often not able to do that. So visualization is a very powerful tool. And then the last one is positive thinking. And when I talk about positive thinking, I always refer to positive thinking as it doesn't help you by itself, but it's more like a light switch that if it's on, it allows the energy to come through. So if you've been training and you have a positive outlook on life or whatever you're trying to improve on, it's going to allow it to happen. And with this one, if people don't believe in positive thinking, I always ask, well, do you have like a friend or somebody who who always wins the lottery, or somebody who always gets hurt, or they always have bad luck or good luck, and everybody's like, oh yeah, I got a buddy like that. And I go, okay, so you believe in this magical luck thing, but you don't believe in the power of your thoughts. And they're like, huh. That's why I don't like that Sajnog guy.
Sajnog.
Awesome. Well, Chris, if you are ever in the Florida area, I'm 100% keeping my eyes open for a class, or even if you're not, if the schedule works up, I'd love to see you, because you bring a huge amount of value to the training community. Where can our guests follow you and maybe get some of your books, or see you online, or how can our guests get more of Chris Sajnog?
Well, I actually do all my training online now. I've found it to be more effective than even me training you in person, because you can rewatch the videos and ask questions, and there's all kinds of psychological reasons why people will train better online at home. But if they go to chrissajnog.com, that's Sajnog, probably an easier way to find how to spell my name is How to Shoot Like a Navy SEAL, or if you look up Pack Tacklet Whistleblower, might find it there as well. But I don't have the best name for a website making it easy to find. But How to Shoot Like a Navy SEAL is my first shooting book, and then Navy SEAL Shooting. Those are both available on Amazon. And I have an app coming out probably in about a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about the app? Is it shooting related or martial arts or something else? Or
so
give us a little
the app
maybe?
it's going to be kind of all inclusive. I've started branching out I've taken my new rules of marksmanship, that training system, and it's moving into other spaces. Like I'm in Golf Magazine in the September issue this month.
Oh, wow.
I started working with Titleist Performance Institute, and they're putting my training system into their certification program. So I'm working with them. I'm working with, like I said, Deepak Chopra. I'm working with Tom House, who's Drew Brees' and Tom Brady's throwing coach. All on kind of, taking this system of training, which that's what the new rules of marksmanship, it's a training system. It's not, this is how you hold a gun. this is how you stand. This is how you train to get better at anything you want to get better at. So the app is going to be kind of an all-inclusive area, and it's pretty unique. People are going to be able to pick their experience. So say I want to learn how to shoot. Yep, you can go to the New Rules of Marksmanship training section of the app, or if you want to learn how to golf, you could go to that section. Business, if you want to get better at that, so it's an amazing app. It was not cheap. It's a $50,000 app. So yeah. So life's been good to me after Pack Tacklet illegally fired me.
And we will have all the social media platforms, all the links. We'll have that in the show notes, and whenever your app comes out, we'll be sure to let everybody know as well.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Happy to have you.
All right, Pat, Ox, I really appreciate you guys having me on.
And that is the end of episode 11. We would like to thank our special guest, Chris Sajnog, for hanging out with us tonight. Thanks for listening, and we hope you tune in next episode, for Vin Armani. And if you found value in today's show, then please subscribe and follow us at libertymastermindpodcast.com, Liberty Mastermind Podcast on YouTube, at the Liberty 3 on Twitter. We're on iTunes, Google Play, and feel free to get involved on the comment section for today's show. Until next time, be alert, stay safe, and seek out liberty in everything you do.